Hello, my friends. So, in this one, I'm going to talk about approaching understanding of the ultimate truth of whatever word you want to use. So, I'm just going to say what I point to in all of the videos on this channel cannot be named. It is the nameless, formless, the one who hears these words. It's a nice way to say it. But we refer to it with many different words. Consciousness, presence, the Tao, God. That's a spicy one. There's so many different words which we use. And the word is not important to understand what I point to, because you already are what I point to. Any belief system ultimately arises from the lived understanding and knowing of oneself. All world traditions and religions are a form of the crystallization of these beliefs, of this understanding into belief. So that's why you have all these people in the world who study and adhere to these teachings. But trying to think of a good way to describe this. To do so without authentic understanding of what these teachings point to is like trying to put your boot on after you've already tied the laces. It's a little counterintuitive. Every world tradition, which is an authentic expression of the truth in some manner, all comes back to the same thing which I'm pointing to, which is you. It doesn't matter what religion, what belief system, people can get all up in the air about this sort of thing with all the wars, all the blood spilt over these concepts. But I'm not pointing towards a concept. There is nothing which I wish you to identify with. It's precisely the opposite. It's a collapse of identity, or identity dissolving. One more thing is about, I think, this kind of idea which runs very deep in the society of anyone who's spiritually seeking or anything. The idea that whatever it is you hope to achieve, whether it's unity with God and then you think you're here or something like that, or whether it's enlightenment and you're here, or whether it's, being one with source and then you think you're here or whatever like that. The only thing which prevents this gap from closing is your belief that you are not already here. Right? Yeah. So keep in mind what concepts you hold as fact, which concepts you hold as true. This goes for when we're speaking about this intimate understanding of ourselves, and when it goes for the most mundane, casual patterns that you live out in your life. just an examination of what your default is, if that makes sense. The belief to be a separate being or to be a temporary, is another way to put it, is something that runs so deep in the cultural conditioning. And it isn't true. But unless you are deconditioned in a way by authentic teaching or authentic presence, understanding, and sharing, then you'll continue to have your walls reinforced by everyone you talk to without intending for it, without knowing it even, until you become aware of it. A big one, I think, is the idea that we speak of consciousness. Let's just call it consciousness, what I'm pointing to. And we speak of this commonly, and people wonder about it. And many people say, yeah, well, it's the thing that we have to understand, or, there's a lot of serious conversation about this sort of thing. And I guess there's this sort of idea that consciousness is our thoughts, or that maybe the idea that we're a body, and then we have this consciousness, like a spark or something that animates the body or something like that. And I can understand why people might see it this way. But it's still not an honest and accurate representation or sharing of this truth. The body, the mind, all your thoughts, all those are the contents, are within your consciousness, are within yourself. Everything you've experienced. It's the thing which is pointed to but cannot be experienced. Even the thoughts, oh, I think I'm starting to get it, or I don't understand, or whatever thoughts you're having right now, are not consciousness. They're within your consciousness. They're the contents. They're the soup in the bowl, but they're not the bowl. And in this case, this bowl is invisible. That's a pretty stupid metaphor. A better one is to think of a fork, right? A fork or a spoon. Let's stick with the curved eating utensils. I don't know. So think of a spoon, right? It's one type of metal. Let's call it a steel spoon. Or you know what? Let's call it a silver spoon, because that's fancy. A silver spoon. So silver can be melted down. This spoon could be melted down, and then you have just silver. The spoon itself doesn't exist separately than the silver, right? The spoon isn't anything else other than silver at the end of the day. We point to it and we call it a spoon, but it's just a configuration of silver. You know, it's a form of silver. But you can't take the silver out of the spoon. If you do that, no more spoon. Spoon doesn't exist. So, in this metaphor, silver is consciousness. It's what I'm pointing to. It's you. The spoon, the form that silver takes, is everything you experience. Everything. Your body, your thoughts, even when you're dreaming. Every conversation, every material, everything you touch, everything you see, everything you hear, everything you smell, everything you taste. Every emotion. All of those things are the form which consciousness reveals itself as. But it isn't consciousness. Consciousness is the witness, the one who sees, the one who hears my words right now. The understanding takes place in consciousness. The meaning, the resonance, all this sort of thing. So just as in the spoon is the form of silver, the world is the form of consciousness. But you can't take consciousness out of the world, if that makes sense. Just as you can't take the silver out of the spoon, and there's no spoon. There's nothing to the world apart from consciousness. The world doesn't exist outside of the observance of the world. Everything you know about the world, every fun fact, every story, every discovery, every joke, everything is known by you, to you. It's impossible to know anything of the world separate from consciousness. If this kind of thing is new to you, and you're not just watching because you enjoy my voice or whatever, this understanding is one of the first big steps. From this understanding that you are so intimately linked with your own experience because it doesn't exist without you. If you know yourself to be the one who hears my words. This will begin to shift your worldview from thinking that you are some person, some being who exists in a big world, to seeing that the whole world exists within you, except you are not the person. You are the field in which the person appears. And this understanding is referred to as liberation, or whatever you want to refer to it as, whatever word. And it isn't a consistent something that you can say, oh, I know, and then go and continue to live your life as someone who knows something. It is only available as an understanding in this present moment. It is not something which can be known. The words we use are very limiting. To say know thyself is in a way still not accurate enough, because knowing maybe implies using your mind somehow or thinking in some way, but it's deeper than that. It's impossible to conceptualize this perfectly and deliver it in some way. That's why every time someone's tried to do this and written it down in stone or paper and distributed it as a form of organized tradition, organized religion, it's led to some maybe unintended outcomes, is a really light way to put it. But once you grasp this, and perhaps it's better to say once you release the need to grasp this, all other understanding will flow naturally when you don't leave this place of being. Because you'll realize that every other person or living thing or anything which has the capacity to perceive is not a separate being either, but they are merely the same being which you are in another costume, so to speak, wearing another mask. That the mask that this is and the mask which you wear are not what we are, but our being is one behind that mask, if that makes sense. And again, don't worry about the terminology or the concepts of what I'm saying. It's not important. But the important thing is the meaning which you understand and which you don't claim to know. One of the last things which went for me in my own understanding was the belief to be a person who knows this, who knows something. That's a hang-up, I think, for many. To think that you've stumbled upon some sacred knowledge of some sort and that now you're one of the ones who understands. And it may be true that you conceptually can describe this sort of thing better than some people. But it doesn't change the fact that you and what they are the same. So it's the opposite of hierarchy. It's what dissolves all perceived hierarchy. So once you realize that the silver can't be taken out of the spoon, that consciousness is not separate from the world, that in fact the world is made of consciousness, so to speak, Even that is a kind of crude way to put it. But the result of this understanding is the realization that you don't have to cling to anything, because you all already are the whole thing, expressing itself as you. The old you, which you believed yourself to be, is the you I refer to in that one instance. The true you can't really be described. It's not my intention to indoctrinate you to thinking that you're the whole universe, and then you go around saying, I'm the whole universe. That's not really the point. It's to realize that you always have been the whole universe, but you've been pretending to be a temporary person. To be a person at all. And this understanding does not mean that you don't have a body anymore, or that you don't have thoughts, or that you don't live. But it's a shift of your perspective from thinking that this living is something happening to you, but it's happening from you, of you, as you. Once you have a glimpse of what I speak, don't worry if you don't always live from this place of being, as it's inevitable for you to gradually be pulled closer and closer to your own self once you've glimpsed yourself. It's like, I graduated the first grade. I can't go back and authentically pretend to be in the first grade again. It's like that with understanding. Once you have a glimpse of yourself, you can't authentically suffer anymore at a certain point. You're going to continue to have a life, and that's the best part. But you can't authentically believe yourself to be this temporary thing, this temporary being. Now, why do I say temporary being, or all this sort of talk of separate being? It's because the belief to be a person or a separate being, a body and a brain, is the belief which causes all suffering. It's the belief that you exist in the world and that one day everything might just go black, or that there's some void waiting for you at the end of your life, and maybe you've decided to hang on to some concepts that some people have told you based on a certain tradition or something like that. But at the end of the day, these are all beliefs. And you choose to invest yourself into these beliefs with no evidence, with no knowing. That's why I say you have to know yourself. I don't want you to believe anything I'm saying. You have to experience this for yourself, as yourself. So, the ultimate fear, which everyone faces at some point in their development, and the reason why everyone does what they appear to do to protect a state of being temporarily, the reason why people take drugs, or the reason why people seek certain experiences, the reason why people kind of try to secure themselves down, to tie themselves down to the world and what feels real, and maybe if I can just get a good job, and then I can have a good house and a nice car and all that, then I'll be set, I'll be solid, and then I'll have a handle on things, real grip on things. And then, maybe that doesn't really give you an everlasting peace and you're still seeking and suffering and scrambling around because you think that you have to in some combination of experiences, or you have to do something just to feel okay, because ultimately you think that one day it could all go black, or that one day you'll cease existing. That's truly the root fear of everyone who believes himself to be a temporary person. Keep in mind, there are no temporary people. There is no such thing as like a special spiritual person who has this understanding, and then a layman who doesn't. The layman and the spiritual person are of the same being. It's just the spiritual person or whatever, right? Maybe a little bit more knowledgeable about their own being, and may live in more peace because of this, because the layman is still scrambling around, thinking that what they are ultimately will die someday. But the truth is, what you truly are cannot be killed, cannot be changed, cannot be altered in any way. It is the one who hears my words right now. And maybe this is confusing from perspective that maybe hasn't heard anything about this so far. Because, it seems pretty clear. You have a body. It's not like you feel particularly unified with existence. Like, what is this guy talking about, right? But, I have the exact same day-to-day experience of having a body and all that sort of thing as you do, I'm sure. And this understanding is not some mystical expansion from a sort of small self into a big cosmic self that now feels, at bliss or something like that. It's the realization that the small self who you thought you were has been this cosmic self the entire time. And then this sense of small self, ego or person or whatever temporary being, whatever word you want to use, dissolves. And you realize that you always have been the whole thing. And from this understanding, you live your life effortlessly, because you're not trying to attain anything outside of yourself to be okay, because you realize you already are the whole thing, and this whole experience is meant to be fun ultimately. And this could sound crazy to some people, right? because the world has been conditioned to not be pretty fun, to put it very lightly, right? But this will change over time as more and more people know themselves. And there may always be some people who don't know themselves, right? That's why they say the world is a school. Many different pathways, grades, whatever you want to say, right? Many people learning on different levels. And these levels are not hierarchical. There is no hierarchy of being. Not one is not better than the other. You have to go through the stages to live from this understanding. Or maybe you don't. What do I know? But, I've gone through all these stages of believing myself to be limited in some way. And it's natural. So I notice there's a tendency in a lot of circles of this general topic on a wider scale. People who will say like, "Oh, I just want people to wake up" or something like that. Don't worry about them waking up. Why are you worried about them waking up when you're not living authentically from your being? You're casting some projection onto the world around you, and you're claiming to be someone who knows something. You're claiming to be some sort of special person. This isn't the expression which is authentic. There's nothing which I know other than myself. And therefore, I know everything, because everything is within myself. Everything is not a thing, it's merely a refraction of myself. There's a stage when you think, I'm not this body, I'm not this mind, I'm some sort of spiritual being or something. And then there's another stage when you realize that that's kind of like a denial in a way. Like, of course you still have a body and a mind. It's just they aren't you. But you're not a being separate from this one, the one who hears my words. There's not two here. There are not two or multiple beings, only one, reflected back at itself in many ways. Everything always has been the self. It's not like it changes at a certain point once you understand enough terminology. I might have once used the example of like if there's an alcoholic or something and their life is in disarray because their external world is a reflection of their internal state of mind, right? Everything that you experience, everything which you speak into the world, every relationship you have, every interactions that you have are a reflection of how you see yourself. Of how deeply one knows themselves. So in the case of an alcoholic, their external circumstances are in a disastrous state because they truly believe themselves to be this temporary being which needs to drink in order to feel okay, or whatever, what have you. Any kind of example of someone who's seeking something in the world outside of them. But there really is no such thing as an inside and an outside. There's only an inside. This idea of an inside world and then an outside world kind of continues this idea that you're a temporary being and that there's a world outside of you. It's the opposite. I think that was enough for this video. I love you very much. Till I see you next time.